Okay, so when I posted my original brewing coffee at home video, the one that hopefully you've watched already, I left you guys hanging without a real tasting. And that's because at that time, I didn't have enough experience to know how to verbalize what I was tasting and give you guys helpful insights. Whether or not I actually could have done it at that time, I didn't feel confident in it. But in the year and a half since I filmed and posted that video, I've actually had a ton of practice making coffee and cocktails and giving tasting notes. So today is part 2 of brewing coffee at home. And not only are we going to taste the Moka pot, the French press, and the V60 pour over, we're also going to compare it to the Flair Espresso. So I just brewed fresh batches of all 4 of those brewers. I wasn't able to use the same kind of coffee that I used in the last video. That stuff just isn't available anymore, but I have an even better coffee that we're going to try today, and this room is just filled with this glorious coffee smell. So without any further ado, let's get tasting. So this is not exactly the most scientific test because I know which one's which, and they're also of varying strengths, right? The French press and the V60 should be pretty similar, but the Moka pot is going to be significantly stronger, and the espresso, which I made into an Americano because, I mean, comparing a straight espresso shot to these other ones is really, it's not fair. If you think about the ratio of ground coffee to water in your final brew, these two are gonna be like, I don't know, 15, 16 to 1. The Moka pot's gonna be somewhere around 9, 10 to 1. And an espresso shot is like 2.5 to 1, at least the way that I brewed it. So this would just slap you in the face compared to any of these other 3. So I thought making a little Americano out of it, it'll still be a lot stronger because there's enough here to make a full 8-ounce cup, which this is not, which I still think is fair, but enough jib jabber, let's get into it. Oh, one more thing. I do have a palate cleanser here. This is just some good, clean well water. There's no additives in it, no chlorine or anything. So I will be using that in between tastes, even if I don't show that on the video. So let's start where we started last time, the French press. Wait, there's one more thing. So we didn't talk about the coffee that I'm using. So this is a Starbucks Reserve blend. This is the Papua New Guinea Gloria, I guess. This was a gift from my wife. She works at Starbucks. Hence why I always use the stuff. It is a sun-dried coffee. So basically what they do is they pick the coffee cherries and then let them naturally sort of rot, ferment, fall off the beans on their own, just sitting in the sun. They tend to be really fruity coffees, and they tend to be really funky, I guess, and which is not for everybody, but I just wanted to let you guys know like what's going on here. And in case you're curious, the market value of the coffee we're using today is over double the coffee that I used in the original video. All right, now we can actually taste. Let's start with the French press. First of all, it's perfect tasting temperature, not too hot, not too cool. The big thing that I notice is that it is first kind of sour, not like it's under extracted, but you really notice some acidity, and then you notice that it's kind of a thick, almost syrupy-like texture, what people would commonly call the body. It has a heavy body to it, and almost a gritty texture. Gritty's not the right word. It's very chewy, I guess. It feels very substantial in your mouth. There's definitely a lot of oil in this coffee. Now, comparing that to the V60, right away, it smells a little bit different. It smells cleaner, like there's less heaviness. It feels like a lighter smell. So you do have the acidity, but it blends immediately with the robust sort of coffee flavor right off the bat. With this one, because it doesn't have that oil, because it's so much cleaner in the mouthfeel, it is a lighter and a thinner sort of profile in your mouth. I don't mean thin in a bad way. Actually, I prefer this. I'm just trying to describe the difference between these two. So this is more sour up front because you have that sort of thick texture, which kind of obscures a little bit of the flavor, but it does give you this really creamy mouthfeel. This doesn't have that creaminess, but it gives a lot of those flavors room to sort of speak, and you can taste more of the fruitiness here. You can taste more of the nuances of the coffee flavor. So that's kind of the big difference between the French press and the V60. It's the first time making this coffee as a V60, and man, I still always prefer a V60 to almost anything else for regular brewed coffee, as opposed to espresso, which is usually what I drink. Moving on, let's go to the Moka pot next. So this one is almost like a hybrid between these two. So there's a lot more acidity here, which at first I thought, oh man, it's under extracted, but There's also a lot more fruitiness here. It is a stronger cup, but it has some of the chewiness of this, some of the cleanness of this, but it has more fruitiness and more acidity. Now, it's less subtle than the V60, and to be honest, I'm kind of remembering why I used to brew the Moka pot every single day. It is a really, really good cup. It's not really true espresso in as far as the modern definition, what everyone means when they say espresso nowadays. It's not like that. It's not pressurized. It's nowhere near that strong, but it is fantastic coffee if you get your brew right. It's not bitter. I would say actually this is the least bitter out of all three so far. Oh man, really, really got a lot of cherry, a lot of the coffee cherry flavor in that. Just brilliant, brilliant tasting coffee. Last but not least, we have the new kid on the block. We have the Flair Espresso press. Let's give this a go. Okay, so a lot less acidity in this cup. The fruitiness comes through, but it takes a second. It has probably the least amount of acidity. It has kind of a medium body and mouthfeel. But I gotta say that when you have it in an Americano like this, it's kind of interesting. It has a different kind of vibe from all three of these. I'm not really sure how to describe what I'm tasting, so I'm gonna go back through these and then hit this again. Okay, I know what it is. This one is sweeter. It has more of a perceived sugar flavor and almost like a toffiness that's coming out in this coffee. You still get the cherry flavor, but this particular coffee is a darker roast. I mean, Starbucks doesn't say it's a darker roast. I think they say it's a medium. Let's see, what is it? What does it actually say on here? Let's see here. Well, they don't really tell you, but I can say that for a lot of specialty roasters, this would be a dark roast to a lot of them. Whereas for Starbucks, it goes way darker than that. So I think they would call that a medium roast, but it is a reasonably well-developed coffee in the roast, meaning it's roasted a lot. It's roasted pretty dark for a lot of people. That being said, you tend to get less acidity in the cup compared to a lighter roast, and you get more like chocolate, baking spice, and cookie flavors. None of these really had that for me. You know, this one has more of the cherry flavor. This one kind of has a dark, maybe chocolate flavor. This one maybe kind of a blend of both. I'm not sure. I gotta say the French press is my least favorite so far this morning, but this one tastes like kind of a oatmeal-y kind of cookie cherry flavor with almost like a brown butter or brown sugar kind of thing, and it's sweeter. I think that's why it makes me think cookie compared to these other ones, because it tastes kind of sweet. So the $1,000,000 question beyond all of the tasting here, what would I recommend to you? What brewer would I say is my desert island brewer, and what would I get rid of more easily, and what would be the one that I'd hang on to the bitter end? So I think the simple answer for me is the Flair. I think it's the most interesting and the most versatile, because if you want a shot of espresso, you can do that. If you want to make a proper steamed milk drink, you can do that. If you want to have an Americano, you can do that. And all of those are fantastic if you get your brew right and use a good coffee. Secondly, I think for just straight up brewed black coffee, something that really just accentuates the things that I like in coffee, which tend to be more like really light roasts, really fruity coffees, acidic coffees. I think this one's my favorite, especially because I think that a Japanese style iced coffee, which is a V60 where you use part of the brew as ice in the carafe, and you know, cold brew cannot hold a candle to that stuff. It's incredible. So I think that this would be my number 2 brewer. My third favorite brewer would be the Moka pot, because it's really interesting. You know, this one had the highest amount of fruit flavor to it and the most acidity, which I don't think a lot of people would expect. That said, it does brew strong enough easily to hold its own with milk drinks, especially if you cut the brew off halfway through, like I showed in my Moka pot latte video. It's also a beautiful kitchen appliance, and I love having this thing around. It looks cool, it's fun to use, and the coffee it makes is really interesting and really delicious. And so probably the one that I think just doesn't hold up to me is the French press, which is kind of sad because I started brewing coffee with the French press, and that was where I discovered, hey, I actually love the flavor of coffee when it's brewed right. That said, I think that the only thing it offers is the richness of texture, and when I want a rich texture, I think you get that kind of creaminess out of an Americano. It's not the same because this is more like oil-based, if you will. I didn't explain that very well. It's a different kind of creaminess, and personally, I prefer the texture of an Americano, and I like to have more flavor. I like more going on. It needs to be more interesting to me. And so the only redeeming factor for the French press is that they are absolutely dirt cheap as coffee brewers, and they're really easy. So if I had a desert island brewer, it would be the French press, simply because it is the easiest one. You don't really need a timer. You don't even have to have a scale. It's really easy to get right. You can have a crappy grinder and still get good French press. You can have no timer, no scale. You don't have to have a stovetop or anything. You just need hot water, ground coffee, even if it's not ground very well, and the brewer, and that's it. There's no filters to replace. It's bulletproof, and again, they're, generally speaking, the cheapest brewer on the table. So for a desert island brew, it would be the French press. So if you saw the original video and you want to see more content like this, just remember, this is the new home of my coffee content. The other channel is going to be just for music, so if you want to see any content like this, this is where you got to subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. Hit the like or dislike button as the mood suits you, and I hope to see you in the next video. Cheers.